So that's Groombridge House in Kent. Has a moat all the way around it, which you never really see, but I like the idea of 5 virgins living on an island surrounded by a moat. And then this here is the only set that we actually built for the film. They really didn't exist, the assembly halls, anymore. So, and this I think was probably my favourite 4 days of shooting. We had a lot of people and we designed the set so that it felt crammed, so we found out how many extras we could afford, and then we built the set around the extras. And I wanted it to feel like a proper knees up, really. Proper English knees up. And to create that sweaty, hot atmosphere. So we kept the cameras back, and we had 3 cameras, and we just shot the shit out of it, basically. And just get everyone going as much as possible. And tried to get the extras to feel like they were actors and feel like they were really part of it. So all the cast kind of weren't kept separate. Often the film sets cast are kept separate from extras and there's kind of elitism going on, but we tried to kind of integrate everyone and it worked. A lot of gay Australians amongst the dancers there. I won't point now. That's probably my favourite shot in the film. No, I might say that a few times, but that's one of my favourite shots in the film. I think they look lovely. There. That's what I call the meerkat shot. I wanted to hold back looking at Darcy, seeing Darcy for a while, so you don't really get a proper close-up of him, you don't really see him clearly until Elizabeth sees him. The whole idea of the film is to make it as subjective as possible. So you're constantly seeing the world through her eyes. Caroline Bingley there is wearing the latest fashions. We set the film in 1797 so that we didn't have to go with the Empire Line dresses the whole time. But Caroline, because I think the Empire Line look quite unflattering. I like Brenda in that shot. Bless her. Always getting in there. She knows how to use the camera, does Brenda Blethyn. So yeah, it's 1797, so the waistlines are lower and I think more flattering. And then you can also say that Caroline comes in wearing her Empire Line, and that means that she's the height of fashion, London fashion. Not well shot, this little section, I don't think. It's a bit boring, which is a shame, seeing it's the first time they meet properly, but anyway. I just found that a bit flat.
And may I introduce Mr. Darcy of Pemberley in Derbyshire.
But they're all doing lovely stuff. Simon Woods, who plays Bingley, I dyed his hair red for this film, and weirdly it's continued to grow red, and he resents me deeply for that. He was actually blonde. But he should get over it, do you know what I mean?
How do you like it here in Hertfordshire?
Very much. Those ladies in the fort.
Ты паспорт когда забираешь?
Блядь, 9-го. Завтра, послезавтра еще спроси.
Думаешь, не спрошу.
Спроси. Молодец. Прикинь, велосипед придумали только в 1818 Ну, я думала, что человечество тупое догадается, что поменялись. Велосипеды сделать поменьше. Прикинь, машины существовали раньше, чем велосипед. Пипец просто. Бля, я вообще прозевала протокол, ничего не открывала. Ты что, спать? Вот так работает? У тебя комп работает? Нет? Еще рано спать, иди ко мне.
...1911 Harley Davidson single belt drive, 107 years old, and I'm going to try to ride this thing. I've never ridden a belt drive, never pedal started a bike, and never ridden this one, so we're going to find out. Have the oil on, I have the gas on, just had to put the carburetor back together. We're going to put our key in here. Raise the exhaust valve here.
Колхида – древнее государство, располагавшееся на территории Западной Грузии. Колхеты на грузинском языке, Кулха на древнеурартийском языке, Килха на древнеарамейском языке, Колхида на древнегреческом языке и Агри на мегрельском языке. Первое упоминание об этой стране и ее племени, Колхов, историки находят в надписях древнего ассирийского правителя Тиглат-Паласара I в XII веке до нашей эры. О Колхидском царстве греки слагали мифы, которые вдохновляли древнеегипетских мастеров искусства на великие произведения. Разрушительные нашествия киммерийцев и скифов, а также события, развернувшиеся в Малой Азии, содержали дальнейшее развитие грузинских племен. Возрождение грузинских племен связано с именем Колхов, о которых мы находим интересные сведения в сочинениях древнегреческих историков и географов. Греческий историк Геродот рядом с персами и медийцами упоминает сасперов и колхов, что указывает на усиление этих двух древних грузинских племен. Наивысшего могущества объединение сасперов достигло в VII веке до нашей эры. Предполагается, что в это объединение под гегемонией сасперов входили все древние восточно-грузинские и западно-грузинские племена, упоминавшиеся сасперами. Колхидой, по-видимому, называлась территория от Никопсии, сегодняшней Туапсе, до Трапезунда и Сарапани на востоке. Эта область была населена и другими грузинскими племенами, но главенствующее положение здесь занимали именно колхи. В этом случае колхида употребляется и в политическом значении, означая страну, которая подчинялась колхам. Название колхского государства впервые было упомянуто в XII веке до нашей эры в ассирийских и урартийских клинописях, как Килха или Колха. Позже употреблялось древними греками с начала первого тысячелетия до нашей эры и было также связано с именем проживавших здесь древних грузин колхов. Первые сведения о Колхиде известны еще из древнегреческих мифов, в частности из мифа об аргонавтах, путешественниках на корабле Арго. Согласно мифу, за поколение до Троянской войны аргонавты отправились морем из Илока в Колхиду. Предводительствовал в этом походе Ясон, на которого царь Пелли возложил поручение добыть в Колхиде золотое руно. Согласно мифу, когда аргонавты во главе с Ясоном прибыли в древнюю и загадочную страну Колхиду, то Ясон влюбился в Медею, дочь царя Колхиды Ээта. Целью царевича было золотое руно, бесценный и могущественный символ власти западногрузинских царей. К слову, в горных областях Сванети старатели до сих пор добывают драгоценный металл, опустив шкуру тонкорунного барана в золотоносные горные ручьи, и тяжелый золотой песок становится добычей людей. Медея помогла Ясону овладеть сокровищем, а потом бежала вместе с аргонавтами из Колхиды. Относительно образования царства есть некоторые разногласия историков. По одной из версий это 8 век до нашей эры, по другой 7 век до нашей эры. Возможно, процесс объединения племен колхов продолжался довольно долго. Как держава, Колхида возникла именно в 7 веке до нашей эры. Возможно, это произошло через
Sapiens.org. Why do we keep using the word Caucasian? Why do we keep using the word Caucasian? Sapiens.
Sapiens. 6.
6 to 7. A history of Caucasian terminology. When a term signifies something that does not exist, we need to examine our use of it. The word Caucasian is used in the US to describe white people, but it doesn't indicate anything real. It's the wrong term to use. My colleague and one of my longtime writing partners, Carol Mukhopadhyay, has written a wonderful article, Getting Rid of the Word Caucasian, that is still relevant today for how it challenges us to critically examine the language that we use. It's obvious that language shapes how we perceive and see the world. And we know how powerful the concept of race is and how the use of words related to the notion of race has shaped what we call the US racial worldview. So why do we continue using the word Caucasian? To answer that question, it is helpful to understand where the term came from and its impact on our society. The term Caucasian originated from a growing 18th century European science of racial classification. German anatomist Johann Blumenbach visited the Caucasus Mountains, located between the Caspian and Black Seas, and he must have been enchanted because he labeled the people there Caucasians and proposed that they were created in God's image as an ideal form of humanity. And the label has stuck to this day. According to Mukhopadhyay, Blumenbach went on to name 4 other races, each considered physically and morally degenerate forms of God's original creation. He categorized Africans, excluding light-skinned North Africans, as Ethiopians or black. He divided non-Caucasian Asians into 2 separate races, the Mongolian or yellow race of Japan and China, and the Malayan or brown race, which included Aboriginal Australians and Pacific Islanders. And he called Native Americans the red race. Blumenbach's system of racial classification was adopted in the United States to justify racial discrimination, particularly slavery. Popular race science and evolutionary. To answer that question, it is helpful to understand where the term came from and its impact on our society. The term Caucasian originated from a growing 18th century European science of racial classification. German anatomist Johann Blumenbach visited the Caucasus Mountains, located between the Caspian and Black Seas, and he must have been enchanted because he labeled the people there Caucasians and proposed that they were created in God's image as an ideal form of humanity. And the label has stuck to this day. According to Mukhopadhyay, Blumenbach went on to name 4 other races, each considered physically and morally degenerate forms of God's original creation. He categorized Africans, excluding light-skinned North Africans, as Ethiopians or black. He divided non-Caucasian Asians into 2 separate races, the Mongolian or yellow race of Japan and China, and the Malayan or brown race, which included Aboriginal Australians and Pacific Islanders. And he called Native Americans the red race. Blumenbach's system of racial classification was adopted in the United States to justify racial discrimination, particularly slavery. Popular race science and evolutionary theories generally posited that there were separate races, that differences in behavior were tied to skin color, and that there were scientific ways to measure race. One way racial differences were defined was through craniometrics, which measured skull size to determine the intelligence of each racial group. As you can imagine, this flawed application of the scientific method resulted in race scientists developing a flawed system of racial classification that ranked the 5 races from most primitive, black and brown races, to more advanced, the Asian races, to the most advanced, the white, or Caucasian, races. Even though the 5-race topology was later disproven, Caucasian still has currency in the US. One reason we keep using the term Caucasian is that the US legal system made One reason we keep using the term Caucasian is that the US legal system made use of Blumenbach's taxonomy. As early as 1790 the first naturalization law was passed, preventing foreigners who were not white from becoming citizens. But according to Mukhopadhyay, Blumenbach's category of Caucasian posed a problem because his classification of white also included some North Africans, Armenians, Persians, Arabs, and North Indians. The definition of Caucasian had to be reinvented to focus the ideological category of whiteness on Northern and Western Europe. The term, even though its exact definition changed over time, was used to shape legal policy and the nature of our society. A second reason the term has had staying power is that, as new immigrants began to stream into the country in the 20th century, political leaders and scientists supported a new racial science called eugenics that built on 19th century notions of race. Eugenicists divided Caucasians into 4 ranked subraces: Nordic, Alpine, Mediterranean, and Jew, Semitic. I'm sure you will not be surprised to learn that the Nordics were ranked highest intellectually and morally. These rankings were used by our government to design and execute discriminatory immigration laws that preserved the political dominance of Nordics, who were largely Protestant Christians. Today the word Caucasian is still used in many official government documents, and it continues to carry a kind of scientific weight. For example, it is found in social science and medical research, and is used by some colleges and universities in their data collection and distribution of student, staff, and faculty statistics. In Mukhopadhyay's research, she sampled government websites and official documents and was surprised to learn how many government offices, including the US Census Bureau, still use the word. So Caucasian became entrenched in our legal, governmental, scientific, and social lives. And although the US government reluctantly denounced or at least played down racial science after the atrocities of Adolf Hitler's regime were fully exposed at the end of World War II, the term has not been discarded. What can we do to change it? We need to acknowledge that the word Caucasian is still around and that its continued use is problematic. We should use terms that are more accurate, such as European American. Doing so would at least be consistent with the use of descriptive terms like African American, Mexican American, and others that signify both a geographical and an American ancestry. The bottom line is that it is time for a modern and accurate terminology. The use of an outdated and disproven term that falsely purports to describe a separate race of people has no place in the US. Love our work? Your support keeps Sapiens accessible to all. Think Human. Get our newsletter with news stories delivered to your inbox every Friday. Teaching. Linguistic Anthropology. Unit 1. Language shapes the way we think about, understand, and communicate who we are individually and as members of the many intersecting groups that define us. This unit will allow students to consider how identity is demarcated and sustained by language and ways of speaking both among members of the same group and between.
Спасибо.
Colorado.edu. Center for Asian Studies wins $2.2 million to help make Asia accessible for Coloradans. Published, August 17, 2022. 4. Funding from U.S. Department of Education helps Center realize its mission in fundamental and transformative ways, Interim Director says. The Center for Asian Studies has won $2.2 million in funding from the U.S. Department of Education to support its role as a national resource center in Asian studies and to provide foreign language and area studies, FLAS, fellowships for students at the University of Colorado Boulder. Timothy Oakes, interim faculty director of the center, noted that the award supports one of the center's primary missions, to make Asia as accessible as possible to the whole CU Boulder community. This funding helps us realize that mission in fundamental and transformative ways, Oakes said. FLAS fellowships fund the study of Asian languages and area studies both on the Boulder campus during the academic year and in Asia during the summer. The National Resource Center funding will also support several existing and future initiatives that seek to make Asian area studies more available to students and faculty from all corners of the university, as well as across the broader Front Range region, he said. We seem to be experiencing a time in the United States where suspicion of global connections, rising nativist populism and fear of challenges to an older world order are on the rise. We believe that this is a crucial time in which international area studies education is more important than ever. Those initiatives include expanding the existing Asia internship program and the cultures and languages across the curriculum program. The funding will also support the following: instruction of Arabic culture and civilization in the Asian Languages and Civilizations Department, Tibetan language learning in the Anderson Language Technology Center, collaboration with the College of Engineering to develop an innovative climate and society in Asia curriculum, curricular partnerships with Metropolitan State University of Denver and with CU Denver's Institute for International Business, professional development seminars and programs for K-12 educators, and curricular development grants for faculty to expand Asia-related teaching throughout the university. Oakes noted that winning National Resource Center support is significant and would not have been possible.
Unpredge.net. Колорадский университет в Боулдере, Боулдер стоимость Колорадский университет в Боулдере, Боулдер стоимость поступления. Колорадский университет в Боулдере, Боулдер стоимость поступления. 16-23 минуты. Колорадский университет в Боулдере или University of Colorado at Boulder, CU, государственное высшее учебное заведение в США. CU начал свою деятельность в 1876 году. Обучаясь в University of Colorado at Boulder, учащиеся могут воспользоваться плюсами как городской, так и загородной жизни благодаря удачному расположению кампуса в районе Боулдера. Рейтинг университета. University of Colorado at Boulder, ВУЗ, входит в число 40 лучших университетов в США. Университет ежегодно входит в топ-5% лидирующих вузов на планете. Самыми сильными для изучения сферами в данном учебном заведении считаются искусство и гуманитарные науки, инженерное дело и технологии, науки о жизни и медицина, естественные науки, социальные науки и менеджмент, математика, физика, химия, информатика, экономика и бизнес. По качеству образования университет занимает лидирующие позиции и находится на 200 строчки в мировом рейтинге. Благодаря высокому рейтингу среди работодателей во всем мире и в частности, в США, выпускники данного университета обычно без проблем находят работу. Поступление и стоимость обучения. Приемная комиссия производит отбор абитуриентов на основе сданных экзаменов и предыдущей успеваемости заявителя. Большая часть подавших заявления в СИО успешно поступает в данный университет, средний конкурс составляет ориентировочно 84 принятых на 100 заявителей. Учебный год делится на 2 академических семестра. Стоимость учебы в университете достаточно высокая и составляет $33,151 США в год. Образование по программам магистратуры в данном вузе сложно назвать дешевым, стоимость составляет $11 США за год обучения. Учитывая высокую цену за обучение, студенты могут участвовать в стипендиальных программах. Шагая в ногу со временем, университет предлагает курсы с дистанционным обучением. Для уточнения информации по стоимости обучения вы можете посетить официальный сайт учебного заведения http://www.colorado.edu. Состав университета. Колорадский университет в Боулдере можно считать крупным учебным заведением, в котором учатся свыше 36 тысяч студентов. Вместе с местными абитуриентами в ВУЗ могут поступать и иностранные граждане. Процент иностранных студентов в СИЮ составляет 5% от общего числа учащихся. В ВУЗе преподает более 3000 учителей. Среди преподавателей большой процент зарубежных специалистов. Учащиеся вуза могут участвовать в программах по обмену студентов. Учебное заведение представлено в соцсетях Flickr, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, где вы можете подробнее узнать об университете. Инфраструктура университета. Университет имеет в распоряжении собственную библиотеку. ВУЗ предоставляет своим ученикам размещение на территории студенческого общежития. Рейтинг. 103. 39. Страна. США. Город. Боулдер. Бакалавр, граждане. Уточняйте актуальную стоимость на официальном сайте университета. 29 364 USD/год. Магистр, граждане.
You have to decide at the end of your sophomore year. However, while that said, and I think a lot of schools have that, it's still there's pressure to know that before, also because if you don't start taking classes before, it's kind of hard to just complete your major. I think end of sophomore year is when you graduate. So I've been testing out things. I went in wanting to do psych. I didn't love the psych classes so far. It's been mostly intro classes, which if you take intro psych in high school, you can opt out of, but I've had to take a couple of those, and I'm excited for the more advanced classes. But I've really enjoyed the religion department, so I'm thinking there's a major called Science and Society where you can compare a hard science and a social science. And so my hope is to major in psychology and then compare psychology and religion through the Science and Society major. Another part why I want to do Science and Society or just religion, they're both smaller departments, and the psych department is like huge, I think, and like I think it's good to have a mix of those. So there are definitely some majors that everyone goes to as like economics and psych, many others, and then there are smaller ones, and so I'm hoping that I'll be able to get small and large experience in a possible way.
The kind of student who thrives at Wesleyan is someone I think who's
check it out.
Okay.
Кажется, я хочу поступить в университет. О. Cảm ơn đi. Được chương trình đâu. Раз уж ты заказал мне, то бери.
Где там майку? Вот я, да.
Нихера себе, там уничтожил тут популяцию целую. What the fuck was that? А, чуть не умер.